I don't know the actual number, but I've heard anecdotally that if you post a job on LinkedIn right now in sales or in pre-sales, you're going to get about 300 applicants in the first hour. I don't know if that's quite right, but I've certainly seen that. I know that's been the experience of a lot of people who are out there job searching right now. Matthew, is this what you've seen as well, or what you've heard?
That's definitely what I've been seeing. And there are some great jobs out there, or at least that's what it looks like when you're going on there on LinkedIn. So I think you're thinking today's conversation can help answer some of those questions and give people an idea of what they should be doing.
I think it can. We got some good strategy today that we'll hop into. But first, hello, I'm Jack Cochran, General Manager of PreSales Collective and co-host of the PreSales podcast, along with my co-host, Matthew James.
Hey, everyone. I think you should be excited about today's conversation. And Jack, who did we speak with?
We talked to Raphael Joseph. This is actually part 2 of a 2-part episode. So if you've not listened to part 1 with Raphael yet, pause this. It'll still be here. Go back, listen to the one from a couple weeks ago, part 1. Raphael, if you don't know him, he is an SC turned into a recruiter. He has his own recruiting company called Brando Tech that he has been helping AEs and SCs alike find roles in software, B2B sales, and B2B tech, etc. He also recently, in December, started a training AI company helping companies with their AI transformation called We Are Agentic. You can find all of that on his LinkedIn profile. If you search for Raphael Joseph, you'll find him there. Today's conversation was all about getting away from classic job hunting in many ways into what you need to know and do today. And I took away a couple of interesting tips that I'm going to do next time whenever I find myself in the job market again, Matthew. It sounds like you had a couple more things you took away as well.
Make sure you think about your skills that you use as an SE and don't just turn them off as soon as you start looking for a job. I thought that was really interesting. And you're totally right. People are not going to want to miss last week's episode. So make sure you go hear that.
That was my big takeaway, right? We have all these skills as SEs that we forget about as soon as we enter the job market. I don't want to spoil too much of it though. So we're going to hop right into the episode right after the break. Thank you, Opine, for sponsoring this episode. SEs, let's be real. You didn't sign up for this job to babysit spreadsheets, play email tag, or spend your life updating CRMs. Your time is worth more than that. That's why Opine exists, to automate the admin work and let AI handle the chaos so you can focus on what actually wins deals, strategic selling. Here's how it works. Opine's AI syncs with Slack, Gong, Zoom, email, and your CRM, automatically analyzing deal context, summarizing calls, and ensuring every proof of value, or POC, stays on track before you or your stakeholders even think about it. Performance tracking? Done. Stakeholder updates? Opine auto updates stakeholders, scores deal risks, and delivers real-time reporting without you lifting a finger. While other platforms still make you manually update everything, Opine pulls it all together so you spend less time on admin and more time closing. The future of pre-sales isn't manual, it's AI-powered. See for yourself at tryopine.com, where pre-sales work flows. Matthew, what was your favorite takeaway from last 2 weeks ago, if you can remember?
I think the idea of personal branding is something that everyone should be thinking about. So the overall episode was definitely a highlight for me, and specifically me getting on the hot seat and Raph giving some specific feedback about my LinkedIn, which I won't spoil. So go and listen to last week's episode. What about you, Jack?
I started trying to connect with 100 to 200 people a week. I've been trying to do that. I had no idea. So I've been going through and doing that. Actually, what's interesting is that one thing that LinkedIn makes easy for me is a lot of people put PreSales Collective in their profile. So I've been going through and I realize there's a lot of people in the community I haven't connected with yet. So it's an easy way for me to go through and connect with people is doing that. If you're listening and you are a PreSales Collective member, put it in your bio in LinkedIn.
Welcome back, Raph. Another exciting episode talking about job hunting. So the point of today is that classic job hunting is dead. So what is classic job hunting, Raph? Help us start there.
Hello again. Thanks for having me back. Pleased to hear last week was useful. Jack, I was smiling actually as you said that you went through and you were adding 100 people. I mean, I tried to do it every week and always managed to reach my limit, which is within a 7-day period, I found. So it starts from the time that you add your first person, then you've got 7 days to add those 100 people in there. Classic job hunting. This came about after actually a number of conversations that I had with people that had just reached out to me. And there was a theme that I kept noticing, which was they would say to me, for the first time in my career, I'm having to go out and find a job. I've always done this through my networks or going to networking events. As people thought they would just be introduced to somebody through somebody that they knew, and then they would send their CV over. And that was your classic job hunting. That's certainly how many people got. Of course, you can go through recruiters as well, but that was your classic job hunting. I think maybe the way I'm referring to it is almost in a pre-LinkedIn or pre-digital age. And I think that we're now in the age of digital job hunting. And that's a completely different mentality for many people. Certainly, I think more for people of my generation. I mean, I'm 45, so I think sort of my generation and older. So you've maybe been in the workforce for between 25 and 40 years. And you started work pre-social media, almost just at the time this email came out and so on. And so I think that's where this changes, that classic job hunting has changed. And now we're into the world of digital job hunting and personal branded job hunting, for want of a better phrase. I don't know a better way of describing it, but that's what I meant by that.
So this idea of I go out and look for jobs on their job sites, submit my resume, and then find out if I know someone through my network and contact them that way, like that kind of classic way of looking for a gig.
Yeah, going and finding a job, this advertised and just sending your CV off to them. And that used to be quite a good way of working. I can tell you now that it doesn't. There are things that I know of from my own clients that I've worked with, when jobs are on LinkedIn and so on. And just as an example, they get hundreds and hundreds of applicants sending in their CVs. And you might have one person tasked with going through all of those. And that person is likely quite a junior person on the other side in the company. And your CV just gets lost completely. But that used to work. I remember having done that myself and having got companies get back to me. I think it's very low statistical likelihood nowadays.
So if you see a job posted on LinkedIn, why is it even there then, I guess is the question. If companies know they're going to find it through other means, why do they even do that?
It's a really good question. And I have to say this, these views are my own. They are anecdotal. I'm basing it on my own experience in the market from having spoken with clients and candidates over the past few years about this. But I would not advise anybody to apply directly for a job. That is my honest advice. I think that it can happen. But again, going back to what we were talking about last week, I'm all about increasing your statistical likelihood of getting that role. And so what can you do to have the biggest bang for your buck in a way and put the highest chance? And so why the companies post it? I think part of it's marketing. I know companies out there that put jobs that don't even exist because they want to look like they're growing and it's good marketing for them. You will also get many organizations who they don't want to pay a recruiter. And so they themselves will just go out and see, they hit and hope. They'll go and put the advert out and see, maybe they'll get a few people coming in. But what they typically find is that they get hundreds of applicants, 80% of whom are just not relevant for the role. And they lose the will after they've been through 20 of those CVs to continue and hit the other 300 that they need to get through. And so what happens is often your application is not even looked at with these roles. And then what happens is the companies go through 2 or 3 months of not hiring anybody. And then finally they decide to bite the bullet and call a recruiter and then go through a recruiter, which then takes more time. And, by that time you've already put your resume forward and probably the recruiter won't be able to put it forward again because you've already put it forward. And so you've actually done yourself a disservice at the end of all of it. And I think it's quite unfair on people that this is the situation. And so I'm, to some degree, trying to give an inside view as to what's going on here.
I've definitely seen jobs that have 300 plus applications already sent. And so what you're saying is you're going to be having a 1 in 300 chance of being selected. And maybe not even that because they're tired and maybe they're only reviewing the first 50. And I totally resonate with this. I used to apply for jobs. My first job that I applied for, I walked into an Old Navy and handed my resume over. It got lost. And so classic job hunting didn't even help me out at that point. Sounds like there's maybe a new way, though. And Jack, you were going to jump in.
So I never really thought about that before, about companies who put out the posting, pull it back, and then go through a recruiter. How often do you see that? How often? I mean, you're guessing anecdotally. How often do you feel like that's the course that a company will take? Is that 1 in 5 postings that you see or companies?
I would suggest it is more often than not.
Oh, really?
I mean, the number of times that I have been contacted by a client who said, we've been trying for 3 months. I mean, I have a role at the moment that they've been trying for nearly 12 months to find somebody, and they've been insistent on doing it themselves, and they have just not got anywhere. And I sent 2 people to them, 2, and now they're moving forward with one of them. And there's a reason for it. Recruitment, I think, over the years has got a very bad name for itself. And, for many recruiters, deservedly so. But there are many good recruiters out there, and they know their industry very well. Many of them, to some degree, are like myself. They've come from the industry and done those jobs themselves. And they know what a client is looking for. And they are the ones that have the network. They put in the work to find the right people. And all the roles that I've placed, I've rarely sent more than 3 CVs to my clients. And if I don't have anyone else, I just don't send them over. Imagine your chances are 1 in 3 through, say, a recruiter, a good recruiter anyway, versus 1 in 300 if you apply. And Matthew, exactly as you said, they might not even get to read your CV through just sheer lack of will.
You're obviously building up a base or a clientele of people. So then the question that obviously comes next is, well, how would someone get on you or another recruiter's list of people to use as recommendations? How does someone then get on your point of view?
It's a good question. You can contact the recruiters directly and have a conversation with them and let them know you're on the market. Recruiters will identify the good candidates very quickly. And a good recruiter knows a good candidate from a not so good candidate and has their top people. And of course, they'll put you in their database and they'll tag you, be able to search for you based on all the areas that you think are appropriate, location and skill set and industry and so on and so forth. A good way of doing it is going and finding these roles on LinkedIn or wherever they are, and then doing your own investigation. So taking those roles and going and finding who the company is. And that sort of goes to the way that I prefer. I think people should search for jobs, which is touching on what we were talking about last week, which we can maybe talk a bit more about today if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hop into that. If we're thinking about someone who is just at the very beginning or just getting started, I think it builds a little bit off of what we talked about last time on personal branding. So if you haven't listened to the last episode and you're listening to this as a podcast, pause now and go back, listen to the last one first before you continue. I feel like that's something we talked about last time, that if you're looking to start job hunting, you need to start months ago building your personal brand. So hopefully you've done a little bit of pre-work with that. You've got that built. Someone who's going to go look at your LinkedIn profile is going to see something more than just your list of job titles and no posts, no interactions. But where do we go from there? What's the next step?
Of course, there's going to be people listening today who have not started that journey a few months ago, and they might have been laid off or they want to move roles, and so they have no choice really at the moment. They have to jump into it. And so the first thing to do is to not jump into it. That's the first thing. The first thing is to stop and look at your LinkedIn profile and get that ready and get it where it needs to be. Again, I said this last week, the number of times I see people reaching out to companies and they have not spent a moment on their LinkedIn profile, which is the first place that somebody will go and look. That's the first thing to do, is to spend time on your LinkedIn profile. And I would recommend going back to the last week's episode and listening to that to go through that, because it is absolutely crucial. And the sort of shorthand towards it is to really look at yourself as a product. You are, to some degree, your own product, and you're selling yourself. And to think about yourself in that way, don't focus on your CV. Your CV is not important. What is important is your LinkedIn profile. You can just export your CV from your LinkedIn profile and add to it if you want to. And then you really need to start thinking about trying to fast track those warm leads, as I was saying last week. It takes months and months to build up your network and identify your ICP, who are the hiring managers, and start connecting with them and commenting on their posts and building up the warm leads and getting them to see you and who you are, and hopefully following you and reading some of your posts and reading your comments. And by the time you reach out to them, they are ready for you because they've been following you, reading your posts. But if you don't have that time to do that, at the very least, you can find the roles that you're interested in, and you can typically find the company that those roles are for. Sometimes it actually says the company that they're for. Sometimes you can do a bit of searching on the internet and using the terms that were inside of the LinkedIn post and searching for them on the web, and you'll find who the company is, and you can start reaching out yourself directly to those hiring managers. Or at the very least, find the recruiter that might be involved with that as well. Recruiters are a good approach. As I said, a good recruiter is worth their weight in gold, not just for the company, but for the candidates, because a good recruiter might have had candidates that have gone through the process already, and so know the types of questions that you're going to be asked. They know the process, all the interview stages properly. They know the company well. They know the hiring manager well. They can prep you. They can practice with you for your interviews, all of these things. So a good recruiter is absolutely worth going through. It, in my opinion, gives you a real advantage over people who are going directly. But if there is no recruiter, then you can go directly to the hiring manager. But again, you want to be connected with that hiring manager on LinkedIn, maybe have spent a little bit of time commenting on their posts, reaching out to them directly. This is what I mean by the new way of job hunting. It's like building warm leads yourself as if you're about to sell a product to them. This is what good AEs do. They're on LinkedIn, they're identifying their ICPs, they are warming them up, having connected with them, commented on their posts, watched some videos, commented on those. So they are warming up their ICP for the eventual email when they reach out and say, hey, this is what we do. I saw what you do. Would love to get a chat. But there is no reason that you can't take that approach for yourself. And it works quite well. A hiring manager, imagine it from the perspective of the hiring manager. They're looking for somebody, and suddenly they get somebody that reaches out. I've had this as a hiring manager. I had this. Someone reaches out to them on LinkedIn. They look at their profile. Their profile looks absolutely perfect for the job that they have put out there on LinkedIn. And this person's reaching out to them saying, hey, I'm really interested in this role. I can see that you're the hiring manager. I would love to have a 10, 15-minute chat with you. And you put a Calendly link inside of there as well. Just make it easy for them. And suddenly you're at the top of the queue. And that hiring manager probably will typically not bother with then following process and going back to their HR department and saying, oh, I found it. They'll just click it, book it in, have a 10, 15-minute chat with you. And if they like you, they'll say, okay, great, I'd love you to enter the process. And if they really like you, they will fast track you themselves. Imagine the hiring manager being your internal champion. That can happen. And so it's a very different approach to the old days of sort of spending hours and hours writing your CV in Word or whatever, and then having it as a PDF with a cover letter that you send into a job that probably nobody's even looking at.
It's a very different approach. And I do like that idea of warming up. I want to ask about something that I have also seen, though, which is if we're talking about warming up, going in overtime, kind of commenting, what about like flash broiling, which is what I've seen happen, which is I remember a couple times when I've posted, I would get about 15 notifications in LinkedIn. I would hop it open. It would be all the same person going back on my entire post history and liking and commenting on every single thing I've done over the past year. Maybe I'm different, but for me, I go, oh, it's because I posted a job and this person's trying to get on my radar. And so it felt very forced as opposed to someone just reaching out. What are your thoughts on, like, can you go too far or does that actually work for most people? I don't know. I could be different.
It's actually a really interesting question. I don't think I've ever spoken to anybody about it, but it's always been something in my own head because I've had that experience as well. So I had typically not commented on posts that are more than a month old. I think a month is the limit to some degree that you can go in and comment on posts. I mean, there may be different opinions to that, but I've always thought that that was the case. If somebody went in and commented on a post of mine from 1.5 years ago, it would potentially bring that person to the top of mind, but not in a positive way. as you said, it might be too forced. But I definitely think that it's possible to go a month back. I certainly do.
I'm so glad you brought up the idea of treating your job search as if you would treat an account that you're working on. You're so right that a good account executive is going to be reaching out and seeing all kinds of different parts of an account before getting in touch with them. And our pre-sales people have great discovery skills, and they have great skills of identifying a problem and creating resources. And I think those are two things I've seen done really well when getting in touch organically, like you're talking about. So one, do research as if you're researching an account you were selling to, because that's going to help you understand and to speak their language. And then two, something that I've been recommending, those resources. If there's an appropriate time in your discussions, could you put together something that is going to show your hiring manager that you understand their business? Maybe something like a 90-day checklist of how you would want to bring value or something along those lines. If you don't want to go down that route of liking 18 months worth of history, which we agree I don't think is the way, this is another way that you can differentiate yourself. Raph, what are your thoughts on something like that?
So I used to work at a company where the HR department would prioritize candidates who followed the company. It's this targeted approach. I think it's really important to have a targeted approach, to treat it very methodically, your job search, and not spray and sort of hope in that way, and be very, very focused on the companies that you might want to reach out for. But I would go even more specific. And as I said last, I would find the roles that you like. Go onto the companies, go onto their websites, go onto LinkedIn, find yourself, 4 or 5 roles that you think are really perfect for you. Tailor your LinkedIn profile to those roles and start treating yourself as the product that you're selling to those roles. And so everything you were just saying, Matthew, go in, focus, understand the company, follow the company, connect with multiple people at the company, multiple hiring managers at the company, and really get a sense of everything that's going on. Read about that company in the news, see the things that are coming up, get an understanding of their financials. Are they healthy? Are they not? What you're doing here is you're spending time on fewer opportunities, but you are increasing and maximizing the chances of closing those opportunities. And that is a much better approach towards job hunting than just almost superficially touching these roles. And it's not a numbers game. It's just not a numbers game, applying for jobs. And, I sometimes see people say, I've applied for 200 or 300 roles and I didn't get any of them. Fine, they may have been unlucky, but I definitely think there's going to be some people who just thought that it was a numbers game. And if I apply for 200, I might get a 10% hit rate, and that's 20. And out of those 20, I might get 5 interviews. And out of those 5 interviews, I might land 2 of them. And it doesn't work like that with jobs. It might have done when the market was much stronger and companies were taking a view on everybody. But now that the market is much tighter, that is an employer's market, not a candidate market, that you have to really go in with a sort of high touch mindset towards each one of these roles.
As Matthew was saying, it's that pre-sales mindset within opportunities, right? It's the same. Like, how many times have we tried telling our sales counterparts, we can't chase every opportunity. We need to focus on the ones we know we can win. But yet, when we do a job search, we do exactly the opposite ourselves personally. Definitely, let's think about these as we would opportunities that we want to close. Is a great point.
I wanted to take a second and really just emphasize that, because I've actually heard people say that job hunting is strictly a numbers game. But I think we've all heard the stories and we've all seen what it's like out there. And we really have seen this entire paradigm shift. Maybe one thing I'm curious about, what have you seen out there that's making it more of an employer's market? And how has that shifted for candidates?
It is really what has been going on since COVID ended, in a way. I think there are lots of different reasons as to why it's an employer's market. I think that companies overhired massively during COVID. And so even in the best case scenario, there would have been layoffs as a result of that. But then there was a slowdown. So companies are just not making as many sales as they did. So as a result of that, you just don't need as many sales engineers when it comes down to that. I think that there was a real shift after COVID where companies were getting invested in based on growth, just the number of new clients that they were bringing on board. And there was a real shift from sort of growth at all costs towards margin and profit for companies. And what that meant is that sort of the sales to some degree became not less important, but it wasn't just going out at all costs and growth. And they are actually trying to maximize the amount of profit that they can get out of their current customers. And so many SEs have seen this change where they've been far more involved in adoption and growth discussions rather than just going out and trying to get new deals the whole time. And for SEs, that's been quite a difficult shift because, of course, we all know how much more intensive adoption discussions are and trying to increase the user base from your current customers rather than just going out and doing demos for new clients. And, it's a lot more intensive in terms of the time. And so all of these things have come together. I think AI is undoubtedly having an effect. Although there's so much discussion around AI out there, I actually don't feel that governments or companies are talking about this enough. I know many companies who are just saying, we are really rethinking our hiring approach and we are going to not try and grow through additional headcount. We're going to try and grow through productivity gains that we can get through AI. And of course, you don't just get productivity gains. So I think all of these things together have come at a time. And what it means is that it's an employer's market, that there are more people out there than are necessarily required for the roles that they want to do. And so it's a supply and demand. And the supply and demand has shifted. During COVID, there was a undersupply and over demand from companies. And we are now in a situation that we have in many sectors an oversupply and an under demand from the oversupply of candidates and the demand from the companies.
I think we've all definitely felt that. And I think the overhiring problem into the shortfall has meant that a lot of people who were getting those jobs during the overhiring joined the candidate pool of those who would have felt stretched either way now. So it's getting hit twice with too much supply on there. Let's say you get to the point, maybe you work with a recruiter, hopefully, right? Which I'd never done before, but now I will be considering the next time I'm looking at a job hunt for me. You actually get to the interview. How has the interview process itself changed? And what do candidates need to be aware of if maybe you've not gone through interviewing for a while, or even in the last couple of years, how things might be changing with AI?
So let's start with that. So AI is absolutely crucial. I mean, there probably are very few, if any, SEs out there who already are not sort of in their own heads AI experts. The nature of being an SE is that you sort of run after shiny new technologies and understand how they can work.
You need that curiosity, right?
Yeah, I think, SEs are very AI literate. Let's put it that way at the very least. But still, it needs to be on your CV, on your LinkedIn profile. It needs to be on there. You need to be able to demonstrate what you have done. Maybe go on a couple of courses or have built a couple of apps, whatever. You can not embellish, but you can certainly make the most out of what you have done on your LinkedIn profile when it comes to AI, making sure that you're getting those search terms in there. Because LinkedIn has an element of the SEO. You do want to be found if you're in a search. So you need to get those in there. And I think that what has changed a lot with the interviews that I've noticed is that companies are very, very specific about what they are looking for. They are not taking a view on candidates. And so if you are going into a role and you have a very good sense, hopefully from the job specification of must-haves versus nice-to-haves and so on, you really do need to have everything that they have on the must-haves. Or at the very least, you need to be able to have a good story as to how you can approach that. Because again, this comes up because the market has an oversupply to some degree of people, companies are able to be more specific over what they're looking for. And I can't remember if I told you this story last week, but it was what really hit home to me is that I found this great candidate for one of my clients and put them forward. And they came back to me and said, they were amazing. After they'd interviewed them, we loved them. And I was so excited. I was like, great, this is going to be a deal that I'm closing. And then their next sentence was, but we're not going to move forward with them. And I was just, why? Those two things don't go together. And they were like, yeah, they're great, but we've got 3 people who are even better. That was a real eye-opener for me because this person was really, I thought, perfect for that role. And in another market, they would have bitten my hand off to take this person. And that just gives you a sense of going also back to what we were talking about before of why you don't want to go in with this sort of hit and hope approach, and that you want to go in with a very high touch approach towards it, that you are just not going to get looked at if you are just going after 100 roles and you offer them 10 or 20% of what they're looking for. They're not even going to look at you. They'll dismiss you immediately. And so it all comes back to this, it's a hard jobs market out there. Make it easy for the hiring manager. Show them that you have everything that they are looking for, and let them see your LinkedIn profile, that you're active, that you're engaged in this area, that you're an expert in this area. It's all around the same subject.
That's the big takeaway for me, right? I think that it's just not a number. You're right. The more you're talking about it, like I was skeptical at first when you said it's not a numbers game, but I'm definitely following you now why it's not. As even thinking back to when I've been hiring in the last couple of years, I haven't had to, settle's not the right word. I have been able to be very specific. Like, as you were saying, I've been able to be very specific on what I'm looking for and only take candidates who meet those criteria, or someone who's got a good way that they say they can get to that. In fact, there was one time that someone didn't have something, but the reason why I went with this person is because they had something I didn't know to ask for. And they emphasized in the interviews how much that was going to lead them to being able to fill those gaps. They had a good story to tell around it, like you were saying. Here's a question for you. If you feel like you're a candidate like that, you're going through the job process, do you need to kind of bring that up at the very start? Do you bring that up when you first have the conversation with the hiring manager? Hey, I know I don't have this thing. Here's what I can do instead. Or when should you have that conversation?
I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer to that. I think you have to judge the moment as it is when you're in that. But you are right. You definitely need to have practiced how you're going to answer that. You don't want to be caught out on the spot with the question of, do you have X? And then your answer to it is, oh, no, or, oh, I've not thought about it, or you're clearly just scrambling around in that moment to try to give an answer. You really want to come back. And, I think the funny thing for me about all of this is that, ironically, SEs are probably the best placed people to know how to navigate the jobs market. They are brilliant at research and finding things out. They can find jobs, where they're from, which companies. Give an SE a research project and it's like a dog with a bone. They just are all over it until they cut. So they're very highly skilled, very highly computer literate, of course, can do all of these things. They understand, how to put forward a product, basically, value propositions. And, if only they looked at themselves as a product. And, Jack, I think it was you that mentioned it before, we all know AEs that we have to pull back as SEs and tell them you can't just go for everything. And then as soon as we're in that position, we just make all the same mistakes ourselves. And it's like, SEs know this. They've been there. They understand value proposition selling. I think we were talking about this last week. You wouldn't go in and demo to a client and say to them, I've got 100 different features that I want to show you. I know that you aren't interested in 97 of them, but I'm going to show you them anyway. And we know that doesn't work. We know the focused approach works. You go in, you told us these 3 things are a problem for you. I'm now going to show you how our product will solve those 3 problems for you. And here's a demonstration of how each one of those will work. And we know that works. So SEs are best placed for doing this. It's just changing the mindset of how you've been doing the job hunting until now. But you have all the skills that are required as an SE.
I love that. I don't want to leave this without giving you a chance to talk about how people can reach you. Obviously, they can reach you on LinkedIn, and any projects that you're working on right now.
So I have also set up an AI training company that's taking a lot of my time and effort as well in that. And I've started helping clients actually building sort of AI transformational teams as well. So these are different to the old digital transformation. These are new roles that are going to be coming in, AI specific roles inside of companies. But you can just reach out to me on LinkedIn, I think is the best approach to reach out to me. And even if I don't have something, I always direct people to the right place. Give them a bit of feedback, although I have less time to do that. I used to spend a lot of time just, spending 30 minutes with every SE and just telling them, look, this is what you need to do to your LinkedIn profile. But hopefully the podcast from last week and this week will suffice to be able to offer people that.
Send them the podcast first, say, listen to this, and then we'll talk after.
I think there should be an AI tool for that too, which maybe can be your next project.
An agent to help people with their profiles. Well, Raph, thanks so much for joining us on the show. Very happy to have you on here for this one and the last one. Thank you for listening to the PreSales Podcast. These shows are recorded live during our bi-weekly LinkedIn show called PreSales Live and include a listener Q&A after each recording. To find information on the live show, head to presalescollective.com/podcast, follow the PreSales Collective page on LinkedIn, or join the PreSales Collective Slack. We have a dedicated channel for the PreSales Podcast where you can find more information and join in the conversation after the show. We'll see you next time.